Welcome back to Mr. Music's YouTube page. We're on Chapter 10, Lesson 4, 10.4, the homework P177. I just wrote in a couple definitions to remember from today's lesson. Perpendicular lines, lines that intersect to form a 90-degree angle. So line CD right here is perpendicular to line EF because you can see here they form a perfect 90-degree angle. These little boxes in the corner show us that it is in fact 90 degrees. Parallel lines, lines that if continued in both directions would never intersect. And so you can see that up here. Line CD and line AB, if we continued these lines on and kept going, they would never cross each other. The easiest or best way I can think of to remember the difference between parallel and perpendicular is the word parallel has those two L's right next to each other, which should emulate or look similar to actual parallel lines. And then you just have to remember, okay, the one that has the parallel lines in the name parallel is the lines that never intersect, and then perpendicular would just be the other one, the one that crosses to form a perfect 90-degree angle. All right, let's take a look. Name a pair of lines that appear to be perpendicular. So they named line AB, and notice the formatting that they use. The line starts about where the letter A starts, ends about where the letter B starts, or ends, excuse me. AB right next to each other, the line above. So I know they're talking about this line here, AB, and all the way, if that line continued as well, they're talking about all of it. And they said that it is perpendicular to EF. And we can see AB crosses EF, and they form those 90-degree angles. Number 2, name a pair of lines that appear to be parallel. Well, already in our kind of introduction, we talked about that. We have line AB here and line CD. These lines will never intersect. So again, I have line AB and line CD. Okay, name another pair of lines that appear to be perpendicular. So they already named perpendicular lines AB and EF. And then we can also see we have a similar thing going on over here. We have line CD crosses line EF, and they form a 90-degree angle where they intersect. So we have line CD and line EF as being a pair of perpendicular lines. All right, going down to 4, 5, and 6, draw and label the figure described. So we have line MN, and it's going to go on in both directions because it has the arrows at the end, and line PQ, and again, it's going to go on in both directions because it has the arrows, intersecting at point R, so that's where these two lines are going to meet. It doesn't tell us they have to meet at any particular angle, so I'm just going to draw a couple lines. I'm going to use my post-it note as my straight edge. So there's a line, and I'm going to label this line MN. So point M and point N. Sorry, excuse me, those were my dogs again. All right, and then I'm going to draw a line PQ going through that line. So again, I'm going to use my post-it note as my straight edge. I'm just going to draw a line as best I can anyways, going on in both directions, and it passing through P. There's my point P and point Q. And then these two lines have to intersect, or where they meet, and they tell us what we need to name that meeting point. We need to name that meeting point, point R. So there I have that figure. I'm going to erase that just so I have room for my next one. Obviously, you don't need to. All right, next one says line WX, and these two lines mean parallel to line YZ. So again, I'm going to use my Post-it note, and I'm going to make 2 lines, and they can never intersect. So there's one of my lines. Whoops. And it continues on in both directions, and it has to pass through W and X. And then my other line, and notice if these lines continued on, they should never intersect if I drew them correctly, which I did a pretty good job. At least a passable job, I think. And then line YZ, there's point Y and point Z. And so those 2 lines will never intersect, so they are parallel. All right, I'm going to erase again so I can do number 6. Number 6 says line FH, and this upside down T means that line FH has to be perpendicular to line JK. So they have to intersect, just like number 4, but they have to intersect to form a 90-degree angle. So I'm going to again use my Post-it note for my straight edge. Whoops. As best I can. And I'm going to make this a line, be line FH. So F and H. And then it has to be perpendicular, so I'm going to try to make a perfect 90-degree angle. Again, the best I can. Let me change my pointer options. Best I can. Using my straight edge. So I'm going to mark that as a 90-degree angle. So if anybody was looking at my work, they can see that I've shown that it is in fact a 90-degree angle. And this is going to be my other points, J and K. For line JK. And line FH is perpendicular to JK, which is what they wanted me to draw. Okay, again, I'm going to erase just so I have some more space for 7 and 8. But again, you don't need to. Okay, number 7. Name 2 streets that intersect, but do not appear to be perpendicular. So we have Maple Street here. We have Birch Street here. Elm Street here covers the whole length, and Oak Street here. So think of these as our lines. Okay. So 2 streets that intersect. So Maple is here and Birch is here, so they don't cross each other. Maple doesn't cross Birch, okay? They run, we would say, parallel to each other. So Elm Street crosses both Birch and Maple. But you see here, they cross and form that 90-degree angle where they intersect, right? We could draw those little 90-degree marks, those little boxes in each corner to show that Elm Street passes, it intersects with Birch Street, but it intersects to form 90-degree angles, and Elm Street also intersects with Maple to form 90-degree angles. So that one's not going to work. And then Oak Street, we have Oak Street crosses or intersects with Birch Street, and it intersects with Maple Street. And they intersect, and they do not have a 90-degree angle. We have an acute angle here, an obtuse angle here, an acute angle, there's an obtuse angle, obtuse, acute, obtuse, acute. So, name 2 streets that intersect but do not appear to be perpendicular. That was Oak Street, and then it intersects actually with either one of these streets, and it's not perpendicular. So Oak, and we could say either Maple or Birch. So Oak and Maple, that would be fine, but I'm going to put both answers because we could also put Oak and Birch. Either one are acceptable answers. All right, again, I'm going to erase so I have room to mark up for number 8. But again, you could pause or rewind if you need to. All right, name two streets that appear to be parallel to each other. Parallel. Parallel, let's go back to our definition, lines that if continued in both directions would never intersect. So Elm Street, we already said intersects with Birch and Maple, but Maple, if it kept going on, and if Birch kept going on, these two streets would never cross each other. So name two streets that appear to be parallel. That would be Maple and Birch. Okay, and another student might say, well, look at Elm. Elm and Oak don't intersect. So aren't they parallel as well? Well, if we continued Oak on, eventually Oak would pass Elm right about here. So those two would not be considered parallel. Even though they don't cross here in our photo, see Elm, it's showing ends here. Oak is showing ends here. Even though they don't cross yet, the definition says even if they don't cross yet, if they would cross eventually, if those lines were continued, if they would cross at any point in the distance, then they are not considered parallel. And those two would eventually cross if we continued those streets on. All right, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.